Hello, okay, so I'm still in school. I'm trying to do a couple of videos together while I'm in school and I'm uninterrupted. I'm going to move on now to LO16, which is looking at neural explanations of OCD. So remember what I said in the previous video, you've got two biological explanations of OCD. You've got genetics and neural. Neural means the brain system, so a neuron will be the brain cell and neural structure would be a part of the brain. So we're now going to do in this video, this is LO16, I'm going to look at the AO1 and AO3 for both explanations, so the neural explanation of OCD. Okay, so the first thing I've written on my slide is, what does the word neural mean? When you're talking about a neural explanation of a mental health problem, you're trying to locate the cause of the illness in the brain. There are two sort of theories within this that we could look at. Firstly, you've got the role of the brain. And there are two different parts of the brain that have been identified as being linked to OCD. So firstly, you've got the lateral frontal lobes. Now, those of you who've done GCSE psychology might remember a little bit about the brain, but the frontal lobe is this part of the brain here, which is directly behind my head, my forehead. Now, this part of the brain would have been the last part of the brain to evolve, and as a result of that, that means it does like all of the higher order thinking skills, the problem solving, analysis, making decisions, hypothesizing, thinking about the future, all of these things that maybe billions and billions of years ago we wouldn't have had to do. This part of the brain is responsible for them. When we use the word lateral in science or psychology, we're talking about the sides of the brain. So these parts of the brain, the lateral frontal lobes, these parts are responsible for higher order thinking and logical decision making, helping us to make decisions. Now, if there's any abnormal functioning in that, then the person might not be able to make a logical decision, or think logically. Remember, one of the symptoms of OCD is that there's illogical and irrational thoughts. So, you think if you don't wash your hands, you're going to contaminate someone and they might die. Obviously, that's an illogical, irrational thought, and that could be explained by abnormal functioning in these areas of the brain here. The parahippocampal gyrus is another part of the brain, and that's associated with processing unpleasant emotions. So like any time you feel anxious or stressed or sad, it'll be this part of the brain which deals with that. Now remember, the only way the OCD sufferer can alleviate that anxiety is to do the compulsive behaviour. So they have the illogical thought that they might contaminate someone and die. That creates a high level of anxiety. The only way they can alleviate that anxiety is by doing that compulsive behaviour, like washing their hands 1,000,000 times. If that parahippocampal, try and get my light back on. Back. If that parahippocampal gyrus, the part of the brain which deals with those unpleasant emotions, isn't working properly, then maybe that could explain why the only way that they can get rid of that anxiety is by doing that compulsive behaviour, when in normal people or people who don't suffer from OCD, the brain would do that automatically. However, if it's not working, then that might be why they have that symptom. So two parts of the brain, you've got the lateral frontal lobes, which leads to illogical thoughts, and you've got the parahippocampal gyrus, which is around processing unpleasant emotions, which again, that's why it's such a not nice illness to have. It can be very, very stressful and very debilitating for sufferers because they have so many unpleasant emotions. Another part of this explanation is looking at the role of serotonin. Now, serotonin is a chemical that we all have in our brain, and it regulates our mood. It keeps our mood at the right level. So, most of us go through highs and lows, we have ups and downs, but our mood is relatively stable, over a period of time. Not that you're always happy or you're always low, but you're relatively, at a stable level, and you'll have your slight ups and downs. If your serotonin levels were abnormal, either too high or too low, you wouldn't be able to do that like someone who did have the right levels of serotonin. So it's a suggestion that people with anxiety disorders like OCD, their serotonin levels may be too low, so they can't keep their mood at the right level. So with Under the neural explanation of OCD, I'd be expecting you to write about in your exam the lateral frontal lobes, the parahippocampal gyrus, and the role of serotonin. They are the 3 main points. Remember, an AO1 question on this would only be worth 6 marks. If you can keep those 3 things in your head, what do I need to say about serotonin? What do I need to say about the lateral frontal lobes and the parahippocampal gyrus? Then that will get you, it'll give you 3 little parts of an answer, which could get you full marks. Just like with the last LO, I'd like you to complete the questions in red, please, via Show My Homework to show me that you've understood. And I'm going to move on to looking at the AO3. So, first one, the green one, antidepressant drugs work effectively to treat symptoms of OCD. These drugs work by increasing the amount of serotonin in the brain. Now, serotonin, we've just said, if my levels of serotonin are too low and that's affecting my mood, and you give me a drug that increases my levels of serotonin and that makes me feel better, that could give me some evidence to suggest that's what the problem was. So that green one about the drugs, and the fact that those drugs work by increasing serotonin, is some supporting evidence that the theory about low levels of serotonin is correct. So supporting evidence, and we'll put drugs work. That can be the label. Now in brackets, I want you to put SSRI. That is the name of the drug. So drugs work, SSRI. The next LO was looking specifically at SSRIs and how they work. But basically, at this point, all I want you to know is that SSRIs increase serotonin. Okay, so that's all you need to know at this point. And in the next video, I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. The next yellow one, there's definite evidence to support the idea that neural structures are involved in OCD. That evidence will come from brain scans. So a neural structure is a brain structure. There is evidence that we can take pictures of people's brains and see that they function differently. Now, the fact that that is a picture of a brain, it's something that like a brain scan is seen as highly scientific, robust, strong evidence. It's good. However, lots of studies have found that there's different parts of the brain that are involved in OCD. Now that's a problem because it's not consistent. You'll remember when we've talked about reliability before, and so for something to be highly reliable, it needs to be consistently found. So you'd need to take 100 brain scans of people with OCD and find in each one of those scans that the same part of the brain is affected, and that will give us highly reliable evidence because it's always the same part of the brain. However, what we're finding is when we look at lots of different brain scans, it's always different, so we can't conclusively say it's this part of the brain or it's this neural structure that is related to OCD, so that is a problem. And also a strength. So there's some strong evidence from brain scans, which is good, but the fact that it's inconclusive and it's not reliable, it doesn't always agree, would be a problem. And I would just call that brain scans as my yellow one. Brain scans, but it would definitely be a straight face or an amber. It wouldn't be supportive or negative, it would be a bit of both. The orange one, moving along, not all sufferers of OCD respond to serotonin enhancing drugs. That green one where we just said a strength of this is that drugs that improve serotonin work. The fact that lots of people don't, you can give me a drug which increases my serotonin, but it won't help my OCD. Well, that tells me it's got nothing to do with my serotonin in the first place. So I would link that one to the green. I'll put them both together because they counter-argue each other. But if it was serotonin, the only thing that caused OCD, then those drugs would work for everyone. Okay. Moving to the blue one. Although there is, the label for that, drugs don't always work. Okay, so you've got drugs work, SSRIs, and then not always would be the label for the orange one, and they would go like that next to each other. Doing the blue one now. Although there is research to suggest a link between neural structures and OCD, it is impossible to know whether these neural abnormalities cause OCD or are merely an effect of it. Now, is it that I have OCD and that causes my brain to dysfunction and become abnormal, or is it I have an abnormal brain and that causes the symptoms of OCD? It's impossible to tell. The only way that we could do that would be to follow someone who didn't have OCD, take regular pictures of their brain and try to pinpoint when the brain starts to change. So if the changes to the brain come before the onset of the illness, then that would tell you that it's the cause. However, if they came after the onset of the illness, then that would tell you it would be the effect of it. You wouldn't do that though. It'd just be impossible to do, because you could be following somebody and taking pictures of a brain and they might never get OCD. So it would be quite difficult to do that kind of research. So those studies don't exist. So it's just a question, is how can we really know? So it's definitely a weakness. And the label for that can be quite clearly cause and effect. Okay, the last one, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that OCD can be explained by alternative explanations such as conditioning or faulty thought processes. There are high success rates from treatment programs that use these explanations as their basis. This is a biological explanation to OCD, but there's always a psychological. Could it be caused by could it be, just the way like somebody might act scared to get attention for positive reinforcement? Somebody might develop OCD symptoms for those same kinds of reasons. And in psychology, there's never one answer. There are always a number of different answers for one question. And it's our job really to evaluate how effective each answer is. So it's when you're doing a theory for any illness, it's always nice to finish as your final AO3 point on an alternative explanation, and you will always have alternative explanations. So you've got an alternative biological explanation, which is genetic, and then you've got an alternative psychological explanations as well, which exist. So that is a clear weakness, and we can call that one alternative explanations. Thank you.